When the kidnappers made Joseph choose between us, he let go of his childhood sweetheart and picked me. But I didn't go with him because I knew, deep down, he would regret that decision. In our previous life, the same thing had happened. After I was rescued, Joseph's childhood friend Chloe returned home broken. The kidnappers had taken indecent photos of her. That night, she ended her life. Joseph pretended to be unaffected. He went ahead and married me like nothing had happened. But after the wedding, everything changed. He turned cold, distant. My life became a quiet torment. 7 years passed before I finally pushed him to agree to a divorce. But on our way to sign the papers, he lost control and drove the car off a cliff. Even in those final moments, as death approached, his words cut like a blade. It was always our debt to Chloe. This life was meant to atone for her. So who are you to live in peace? So when I opened my eyes and realized I'd been reborn, I swore to live differently. I wasn't going to repeat the same story, but fate brought me to the exact moment again. A knife pressed against my throat and Chloe's. The kidnappers gave Joseph the same cruel choice. I saw his eyes flicker between us, the same hesitation, the same guilt. Then, just like before, he reached for me. But I didn't let him. I shook my head and said, "Joseph, save Chloe first. In this life, I don't want to owe anyone, and I won't carry the weight of someone else's suffering again." He paused for a moment, like he was surprised. Then he breathed out, almost relieved. "Jessica, you're my fiancée. Should be choosing you. But since you said it, don't blame me." He grabbed Chloe and ran, afraid I might change my mind, but I wouldn't. I never regret my choices. Back in our past life, the same happened. Joseph came to the exchange with money, but the kidnappers changed the deal. Only one of us could be freed. He chose me. While we went to get more ransom, the kidnappers lost control. They took inappropriate photos of Chloe, and they were just about to go further when we returned with the police. We stopped them, barely in time, but Chloe was never the same. That night, in the silence of her home, she took her life. Joseph didn't even flinch. He handled her funeral like a businessman, handed over money to her grieving family, and when I asked to postpone our wedding out of respect, he simply said, "Jessica, marrying you was always the plan. We can't let outsiders affect that." But Chloe, this so-called outsider, haunted him. He didn't marry me out of love. He married me to punish me for something I never did. Once Joseph and Chloe left, I knew I had to rely on myself. I didn't know if he'd come back for me, and honestly, I doubted he would. In the past life, he had placed a tracker in Chloe's pocket when he hugged her. That's how we found her when they moved locations. But this time he didn't do that. Maybe this time he didn't need to pretend. Maybe Chloe was always the one he wanted to save, and I was just a responsibility of fiancé chosen for image, not love. They had shared their youth, their secrets, their purest years. I wasn't part of that story. So maybe in this life, Joseph finally got what he truly wanted, and I wasn't angry. I was happy for him, but that didn't mean I'd sit and wait. I started planning my escape. I remembered from the past that the kidnappers would pass by a car repair shop when they moved locations. The mechanics there were tough, ruthless even. In the previous life, when the kidnappers tried to take over the shop, the owner fought back. They hadn't expected someone more dangerous than themselves. A fight broke out, and the kidnappers fled. Later, that same shop owner testified and helped bring them down. I planned to use that moment. Just like before, they left one man in the car to watch me while the others moved ahead. My hands were tied behind my back, and the man behind the wheel didn't think I was a threat. I waited for the right moment. Then, when he got distracted, I leaned forward, bit down on the car door handle, and somehow managed to open it. I shoved the door open and bolted running as fast as I could. My target was the same as theirs, the repair shop. I was gambling. Gambling that someone in that shop would care enough not to let me die. I ran straight in without even trying to hide. The repair shop was already in chaos, tools scattered, shouting, echoing through the space. That's when I saw him. The young owner. He had sharp, clean features and carried a kind of quiet strength. There was something about the way he moved fast, focus that gave him a cool, almost heroic air. I ducked low, trying to avoid the chaos, and rushed toward him. But I used too much force, and before I could stop myself, I crashed into him, knocking us both to the ground. I landed in his arms, my face pale and trembling. I'm sorry, I stammered. Please, can you help me? Me eyebrows tightening slightly, but said nothing. The very next second, he grabbed me and rolled us across the ground just as a loud bang shattered the air. A chair came crashing down right where we'd been seconds earlier. If he hadn't reacted so quickly, I might not have made it, and my heart pounded as I realized the kidnappers had seen me escape. The attempted robbery had turned into a hostage standoff. I turned to the man beside me, lowering my voice to a desperate whisper. If you save me, I'll do anything you ask. He didn't answer, his gaze remained locked on the kidnappers. Then, someone behind him spoke up. Jonathan. Sometimes it's better not to get involved, so that was his name, Jonathan. He still didn't reply, and my heart sank. Maybe I shouldn't have said anything. Maybe it was wrong to ask a stranger to risk his life for me. The kidnapper leader called for me again, this time for the third time. I slowly began to step forward, preparing to surrender. But before I could take another step, a firm hand landed on my shoulder, stopping me cold. Jonathan moved in front of me and said clearly, "She's under my protection today." And just like that, the air shifted. As if fate itself stepped in, the distant roar of motorcycles grew louder from outside. Jonathan's face lit up with confidence. "My backup's here," he said, hearing that the kidnappers cursed under. Their breath shot me a dirty look and quickly retreated. I exhaled for the first time in what felt like hours. I felt the pressure on my wrists ease, then looked down to see Jonathan had cut the ropes binding my hands. I turned to him, still catching my breath. "My name is Jessica Lynn. Thank you." For earlier, I said softly, reaching out my hand. But he wasn't looking at my face. His eyes were fixed on the deep rope burn circling my wrists, raw and bloodied. He looked angry. "Let me take care of that," he said. I tried to shake my head. "It's nothing, just a small wound." But he wasn't listening. "Who was it just now who said they'd do anything if I saved them?" he teased, not even waiting for a reply. He gently pushed me down onto a bench and grabbed a first aid kit. "Brace yourself." I bit my lip as I watched him carefully tend to my wounds, his hands both gentle and precise. A strange warmth settled in my chest. It was the first time in years I'd felt cared for. My mind drifted back to a memory I tried hard to forget. In my previous life, just after marrying Joseph, there was a night he got drunk. As I helped him to the bedroom, I gently told him he should drink less. Without warning, he shoved me hard. I fell, hit the floor, and the jade bracelet on my wrist shattered. The shards cut deep, screamed in pain, clutching my bleeding wrist. But Joseph only looked down coldly and said, "Does it hurt? It should. Chloe suffered 1,000 times more than this, but she can't cry out anymore. If I hadn't chosen to save you, she wouldn't have ended up humiliated by those men. She'd still be alive." I remember staring at him in disbelief. The pain in my wrist, nothing compared to the pain in my chest. My voice was barely a whisper. "But Joseph, kidnappers took both Chloe and me to threaten you. You chose to save me. Why are you blaming me now?" He looked at me with those same bitter, glassy eyes. "Jessica, I never wanted to marry you. If you hadn't told Grandma you liked me, she wouldn't have forced us together. So what you're really saying," I said, laughing bitterly, "is that if it wasn't for me, you could have just saved Chloe and moved on. You're unbelievable, Joseph. Instead of blaming the kidnappers, you're blaming me." After that, I treated my wounds alone. No matter how much it hurt, I never showed Joseph my pain again. Now, in this new life, a stranger I barely knew was gently blowing on my wounds, afraid it might sting. My eyes stung, too, but with tears. I turned away slightly and whispered, trying to hide how much it moved me. "What?" "What are you doing?" Jonathan looked up, his expression pure and sincere. "When I was a kid and got hurt, my mom used to do this. Makes it feel better." I smiled faintly and nodded. "Yeah, it does." He seemed satisfied and kept working, but the moment was soon interrupted. A tall man with a floral tattoo on his arm walked in through the door, his voice booming. "Ming, I heard someone was stirring up trouble here, so I rushed over." He stopped when he saw me, his eyes lit up. "Whoa, where'd you find someone this beautiful? I think this is the first time I've seen a girl like this at your shop." As he kept staring, a blush crept across his face. Jonathan immediately stepped in front of me, blocking his view. "Shh, thanks, but the situation's already under control. As for anything else, it's none of your business." "I'll buy you a drink another day," Jonathan said, clearly trying to get rid of him. The tattooed man paused, finally realizing what was going on. "Oh, I see how it is. Now that you've got a girl, your brothers don't matter anymore, huh?" He turned away with a dramatic huff, obviously annoyed. Jonathan let out a quiet sigh, pulled him aside and whispered, "Can't you take a hint? Just cool off somewhere else for now." "Ming, is she your girlfriend?" the guy asked, not letting up. Jonathan shot back, "What do you think?" "Totally. You two look perfect together." "Smart guy," Jonathan replied dryly. "I don't care. You still owe me wedding sweets. You'll get your share," Jonathan promised. The two kept whispering like a pair of schoolboys. Even though they tried to keep their voices low, I could hear every word. To avoid the awkwardness, I started pretending to look around the shop up, down, anywhere but at them. A few minutes later, Jonathan finally got his friend to leave. Once it was just the two of us again, he turned to me and asked gently, "Where do you live?" "I'll take you home." Maybe it was selfish, but suddenly, I didn't want to go back. My parents were always too busy with their own lives. Honestly, even if I disappeared for a month, they probably wouldn't notice. And Joseph was right. He had been reborn too. He'd likely be eager to be with Chloe now. In our last life, even after being married to him for 7 years, he never took me to a single public event. We never shared a room. Whenever people asked about us, he always answered coldly, and eventually, I became a quiet joke among our circle. This time, I was determined to stay far away from him. So I tugged gently at the corner of Jonathan's shirt and asked softly, "Could I stay with you for a few days?" He seemed like a good person, at least from what I'd seen in both lives. He was capable of protecting me. If I clung to him now, would he turn me away? Jonathan suddenly leaned in, his gaze locking onto mine. There was a flicker of something serious behind those eyes. "Little girl," he said slowly, "if you keep this up, I might start taking you seriously." Maybe it was because he was standing so close, but I could catch the fresh scent of soap on him. I swallowed hard, about to reply, when a voice I knew all too well suddenly interrupted from behind us. "What are you two doing?" It was Joseph. And he wasn't alone. He had brought the police with him. He stepped closer, his expression unreadable. "Are you okay?" he asked. And for a second, his concern actually seemed real. I shrugged. "Do I look like something's wrong?" He said nothing, just stared. Then Chloe entered. She took one glance around the repair shop, now calm again, and said bluntly, "Jessica, how exactly did you manage to escape the kidnappers?" "As far as I know, there were 6 of them, and your hands were tied. You didn't know the area." "Curious. What is she trying to imply?" she continued, her voice sharp. "Everyone knows the Lin and Shen families are eyeing that piece of land in South City. The auction's in 10 days, and the one who bids highest wins. Now, right when everything's at stake, something like this happens, and they have the ransom. It was insanely high. Jessica, it's hard not to wonder. Did you plan this? Was she really suggesting I hired the kidnappers?" In both lives, I had never been this speechless. I truly felt for Chloe. In the past, I mourned her, pitied her. But this time, I practically saved her. And now, the first thing she does is accuse me? It was crushing. I suddenly raised my hand and shouted, "Officer, someone is slandering me." And just like that, all of us were taken in for questioning. While we waited, Chloe still wouldn't let it go. Jessica, why aren't you saying anything? She pressed. I let out a dry snort. Why should I explain anything to you? You're not the police. She went quiet, but Joseph jumped in, of course. Jessica, Chloe just wants to know what happened so she can be careful about what to say during the interrogation. Oh, so now you're planning to lie to the police. Joseph's face turned red. He stood up, pointing at me angrily. Jessica, you're being ridiculous! That was when Jonathan walked out of the interrogation room. He took one look at the scene, stepped in calmly, but with authority. Put your hand down, he said to Joseph. I stood quietly behind Jonathan. I couldn't see their faces, but the tension in the air was electric. Then Joseph's voice came through, lower now.
Ow!
Who even are you to her? Jonathan turned slightly toward me, a small smile playing on his lips. What do you think? I looked up at his perfectly sculpted profile. Without thinking, I lifted my hand and made a heart shape with my thumb and forefinger. Joseph saw it. And in that moment, his expression darkened several shades. Just then, the officer called Jonathan in for questioning. After a round of interviews, the police had a few solid leads. They'd identified the suspects. Their focus had now shifted to capturing the kidnappers before moving forward with anything else. But deep down, I already knew who was truly behind it. Joseph's business rival was the one pulling the strings. As we walked out of the station, Jonathan glanced at me and said casually, "It's fine." What is? I asked, a little confused. He looked over and clarified, "What you asked me earlier, it's fine." That's when I realized he was talking about letting me stay with him. It's just me and my mom at home, he added. She's staying at the old house right now, and I usually sleep at the repair shop. You're welcome to stay. I was about to say yes, when Joseph suddenly cut in. Jessica, your parents already know about the kidnapping. They probably just landed and are on their way home now. You sure you don't want to go back? A wave of bitterness rose in my chest. It stung that Joseph, of all people, outsider, knew more about my parents than I did. For as long as I could remember, they were always too busy. Too busy to celebrate my birthday, too busy to show up for my school events. I even tried doing poorly in school, or getting hurt just for a bit of attention, because that was the only time they'd show up at all. Eventually, I stopped trying. I learned to bake myself a cake every birthday, bought flowers from the kind lady on the corner, and asked her to attend my parent-teacher meetings and pretend to be my guardian. That's how I grew up lonely, invisible, till I met Joseph. It happened at school. I was walking past the basketball court when someone yelled, and before I could react, a ball flew straight toward me. Joseph stepped in and blocked it without hesitation. Under the sunlight, with sweat glistening on his forehead, he turned and tilted his head slightly, his voice cool and arrogant. Careful, classmate. That moment, his confidence, that half-smirk eye, fell for him instantly. I was too shy to say much, just muttered a quick thanks and ran off, but from that day on, I couldn't stop noticing him. I learned he had a childhood friend, Chloe, but they seemed close in a platonic way. My crush stayed quiet, buried, but it grew year after year. When I found out later that Joseph was the one chosen for my arranged marriage, I was overjoyed. I thought it was fate. My parents liked him too, so much so that they talked to him more than they ever spoke to me. In my previous life, when I finally gathered the courage to ask for a divorce, they were completely against it. Joseph is capable. He even tolerates your stubbornness, they said. You should be grateful instead of causing problems. They never cared about how miserable I was. All I saw was the alliance between the Lin and Shen families. They saw a merger, never a marriage. Divorce would have affected everything, and they couldn't risk it. So I kept enduring. I lived in silence. Eventually, I fell into depression and started harming myself just to make Joseph listen. That was the only thing that finally pushed him to agree to a divorce. But now, with this second chance, I want to live for myself. I don't want to go back. Still, there was one thing I needed to take care of first. I had to return home. Before leaving, I reached into Jonathan's pocket, took his phone, and typed in my number. I dialed it and waited until my phone rang to confirm. Then I handed It backed him and said softly, "Save my number. I'll come find you in a few days." I didn't say goodbye to Joseph. Didn't even look at him. Turned, stepped into a taxi, and left. When I got home, I found my parents sitting in the living room, waiting. Before I could even say a word, they launched straight into scolding me. "Joseph told us everything," my mother snapped. "Can you stop being so reckless?" "Those were kidnappers, Jessica. You could have been killed. And you told Joseph to save someone else before you? What were you thinking?" Sighed deeply, her voice laced with frustration. "How can we trust you to manage the company if you keep behaving like this?" That was the problem. They never trusted me. In the previous life, they handed the company over to Joseph without hesitation. Then they stepped away from everything free to chase their own dreams, leaving me behind. Then my father, who had been sitting silently the whole time, finally spoke. "Let's just get the wedding over with." "Don't agree," I said firmly. My voice was calm, but there was no room for argument. "I came back to tell you that tomorrow, I'm going to the Shen family to call off this engagement. Whether you agree or not, it's my decision this time." I paused and looked them both in the eyes. "And don't even try to threaten me with the company. You can give it to whoever you want. I don't want it anymore. In this second life, I already know what's coming in the next 7 years. I won't end up helpless or poor like before." I said those words and walked back to my room, knowing they were probably even more disappointed in me now. But honestly, I didn't care anymore. The next morning, I woke up early and what I saw completely caught me off guard. My mom was in the kitchen, quietly making breakfast. When I stepped in, she looked up with a soft smile. Aunt Fang told me, "You were looking for food last night. It's my fault. Forgot to check if you'd eaten." Froze. I couldn't wrap my head around it. Since when had my mother been so gentle? She came over and tucked a stray piece of hair behind my ear. Her voice was filled with regret. "Your father and I talked last night. Maybe we've been doing this all wrong. We thought being tough on you would make you independent. We didn't want to spoil you, didn't want you to become arrogant. But now we see, maybe we were too hard. If you want to make your own choices, that's fine. We won't force you to marry into the Shen family." For a moment, I didn't know how to respond. Were they really agreeing to let me end the engagement? My heart ached a little. The little girl I used to be had cried and argued for attention, but all she got was scolded. Later, she thought that if she was obedient and mature, maybe then they'd notice her. But even that wasn't enough. They only saw her as weak. And now I act cold and distant, and they suddenly change. I couldn't tell whether to laugh or cry. The car pulled up to the Shen family villa. It still felt unreal. The whole idea of joining the Shen and Lin families, of marrying Joseph, wasn't even mine. It started with Joseph's grandmother. She collapsed at a banquet once, and I happened to catch her before she hit the floor. She'd fainted from low blood sugar, and after she recovered, she was so grateful. She insisted on making me her goddaughter. That's how I started visiting the Shen family's old house for meals. I didn't even know Joseph was her grandson. Until one day he walked into the room. Mrs. Shen was sharp. She noticed right away how I looked at him. I couldn't hide it, and that's how the engagement came to be. She even gave me the Shen family's heirloom bracelet. And now, here I was, about to give it back. Joseph arrived before me, with Chloe right beside him. Like they were heading to an engagement banquet, not a breakup. Honestly, it was perfect timing. Once I called off the engagement, they could just announce theirs. I placed the bracelet on the table. But before I could say anything, Joseph grabbed my wrist. "What's this supposed to mean?" he asked. Right. I never told him last night that I was breaking off the engagement. I just asked him to meet me here. Mrs. Shen looked between us and seemed to realize what was happening. "Jessica, did Joseph do something to hurt you?" Her sharp eyes flicked toward Chloe. I bowed my head respectfully. "Grandma Shen, I'm the one asking to break off the engagement." My voice was calm, like I was talking about the weather. Joseph's eyes widened. He stared at me like he didn't believe what he was hearing. "Why?" I looked him in the eyes. "Because yesterday, when it mattered most, you chose someone else. I think that's who you really want to be with." I glanced at Chloe. She was looking at me with wide, innocent eyes, playing the delicate little flower as always. "No," Joseph said, voice shaking. "Wasn't it you who told me to save Chloe first?" "I was testing you," I said, flatly, and the result is clear. He was stunned, couldn't even form words. Mrs. Shen gave a long sigh. "I heard what happened, Jessica. You're a good child. It's Joseph who doesn't deserve you." "Grandma." Joseph tried to cut her off, gripping my wrist so tightly it felt like my skin would break. My injuries from the kidnapping hadn't even healed, and now they were probably bleeding again. I held back the pain and looked at him. What a joke. In our last life, he mourned Chloe for 7 years after she died. Now reborn, he wasted no time choosing her again. I laughed bitterly. "If you don't want to agree, that's fine. Tomorrow, I'll hold a press conference and unilaterally announce the cancellation of the engagement. Let the world talk. It'll be your Shen family's face on the line." I peeled his fingers off me, one by one. Then I turned and walked away. And this time I didn't look back. Just then, Jonathan pulled up on his motorcycle outside the Shen family villa. I didn't want to waste another second dealing with Joseph, so I simply said, "Sorry, my boyfriend's here to pick me up." Joseph's expression darkened. Sneered Jessica. "Are you really going to be with a guy like that? A broke nobody? You think he can make you happy?" I shot him a cold glance. "Better than being with someone like you, fake, selfish, and two-faced." I turned to walk toward Jonathan without hesitation, but the next thing I felt was a sharp tug on my wrist. Ouch. I winced in pain. Only then did Joseph notice the bruises and dried blood on my skin. His face twisted in panic. "I didn't know you were hurt." I looked down, hiding the bitterness in my smile. "Even if you did know, would you have cared?" Jonathan stood tall, his voice low and deadly. "Stay away from her." Then, without another glance at Joseph, he gently placed his helmet on my head, started the engine, and took me away. The wind howled as we sped through the mountain roads. I held on tightly to Jonathan's back, the trees blurring past like ghosts of everything I wanted to leave behind. That moment, fast, wild, free, it felt like all the pain from earlier was melting away. "Where does my girlfriend want to go?" Jonathan called out over the wind. I laughed softly. Of course, he'd heard what I said to Joseph earlier. So I tightened my arms around him and answered playfully, "Since you're calling me your girlfriend, can I check out your place?" "I'm starving." "Perfect," he said. "I happen to be a decent cook." "Then I want 4 dishes." He chuckled. "Deal." His laughter echoed through the winding roads, and just like that, I felt light again. Maybe it was just his presence, or maybe it was the way he made the world feel less heavy. When we arrived at his place, I was surprised it was bigger than I expected. He quickly brought out a pair of new men's slippers. "They might be a little big, but they're brand new," he said, slightly embarrassed. I slipped them on and smiled. "They're perfect. I come back once in a while to clean up, so it shouldn't be too messy," he added nervously. Honestly, he was more anxious than I was. And this was his house. I collapsed onto the sofa, resting my chin in my palm as I looked at him. "I can't cook, so you're on kitchen duty today." But instead of rushing to the kitchen, Jonathan came back with a first aid kit. My bandage had stuck to the wound. From when Joseph grabbed me earlier, and the dried blood had fused it to my skin, Jonathan didn't say a word. He carefully poured iodine on the bandage to soften it, taking his time, working with the gentleness of someone unafraid to handle pain. For such a big man, his hands moved like he was holding something fragile. It took him half an hour to clean and re-wrap the wound. When he was done, he looked me in the eye and said, "Don't get it wet for the next few days." I pouted instinctively. "Then how am I supposed to take a shower? 2 days without a bath won't kill you?" he said casually. Then added with a cheeky grin, "I won't mind." "You wouldn't dare." "I wouldn't," he said, raising both hands in mock surrender. "HMPH. You better not." "Should I go make dinner now?" he asked, changing the subject. With a smile, I nodded. "Please do." There was something about Jonathan whenever I was around him. I could just breathe. I didn't have to pretend. I didn't have to carry the weight of proving my worth. An hour later, he came out of the kitchen with 4 dishes, sweet and sour pork, garlic shrimp, steamed fish, and a chilled cucumber salad. He handed me chopsticks. Here, try it. I tasted each dish, and my eyes lit up. This is amazing. The colors, the aroma, the flavor, it all felt warm and familiar, like home. I looked at him and smiled to myself. Yeah, looks like I'll never have to worry about where to eat again. That afternoon, my phone rang. It was my father. He got straight to the point. He wanted me to attend an auction 10 days from now. Said that if I managed to win the South City land, the entire company would be handed over to me. I knew the land he was talking about. It wasn't just our family after Ietha. The Shen family, the Lin family, and several other firms were all watching it closely. In my past life, I missed the auction. Between the kidnapping and the shock of Chloe's death, I fell ill and never recovered in time. But honestly, even if I had been fine, I wouldn't have competed. I was too loyal to Joseph. I thought he was someone I could build a life with. At the time, the Shen family was drowning in debt, and Joseph needed that land. I transferred money from Lin Corporation to help him. He ended up winning the bid, and with it, built a massive theme park. Investors flooded in. The Shen family rose to power, all because of that one piece of land. I didn't even ask for a thank you, but this time, I won't repeat the same mistake. So it caught me off guard when Chloe came to see me. No arrogance this time. No smugness, just quiet desperation. Please, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Don't break off the engagement with Joseph. He and I, we've always just been friends. If you let this go, I promise I'll never appear in front of you again. I stared at her in silence. I didn't feel anger, just emptiness. In my previous life, I believed her. I told myself over and over they were just childhood friends. But after Chloe died, Joseph mourned her for 7 whole years. That's not what you do for a friend. It's what you do for the love of your life. I still remember the day he finally agreed to divorce me. It happened after I'd fallen deep into depression and attempted to hurt myself for the 10th time. He came home to find me lying there, blood everywhere. Maybe he was scared I'd actually die in his house. That's probably why he finally gave in. On the way to sign the papers, he suddenly asked, "Do you even know what today is?" "It's Chloe's death anniversary." I stared at him, confused, and shook my head. I could barely get through a day, let alone remember something like that. My reaction made Joseph snap. He slammed the steering wheel and shouted that I was cold, ungrateful. Chloe gave up her life so you could live, and you can't even remember the day she died. All you think about is leaving. Is that how you get rid of your guilt? You disgust me, Jessica. I was furious. I shouted back, "If you're so grateful and can't forget her, why didn't you just die with her?" The car spun out of control. We went off the cliff. And even as we were falling, his last words weren't of regret or love. He was still blaming me. We owed Chloe a debt. We were supposed to make up for it in this life. So who are you to live in peace? But this time around in this life, I don't owe him anything. I wonder how his story will end now. I raised my hand, signaling Chloe to stop talking. Digging up past lives like this just made me sick to my stomach. Do you still not get it? The Shen and Lin families have already agreed to call off the engagement, I told her flatly. Did Joseph send you? She shook her head quickly. No, I came on my own. I just don't want to see him lose. Her voice softened. Jessica, didn't you always like Joseph? This is my fault. I shouldn't have doubted you after the kidnapping. And I shouldn't have come back from abroad so suddenly. If I hadn't, Joseph wouldn't have had to hurt you to save me. Her words were giving me a headache. You don't want to see him lose? I repeated. Chloe explained, the Shen family is relying on that land in South City to survive. If you really want to break off the engagement, that's fine. But could you at least not compete for the land? I let out a short laugh, cold, bitter. Are you dreaming? And suddenly everything made sense. Back then, when Joseph and I rushed to save Chloe, the police had already caught the kidnappers. Both ransom payments were returned, along with The money I gave from the Lin family, Joseph used all that to win the land. But this time, because I saved myself and caused chaos, the kidnappers ran. The police haven't recovered the ransom or even found them. So now, Joseph has lost his biggest edge in the auction. But Chloe still wouldn't give up. She bit her lip and suddenly dropped to her knees. Jessica, please. Maybe you don't love him, but can't you at least not destroy him? Emotional? Blackmail. Classic. But this was just pathetic. I leaned down, close to her ear, and whispered, "When you heard Joseph was going to marry me, you ran off abroad. But when you heard we got engaged, you suddenly came back. So yeah, this really is your fault. If anyone should be helping him now, it's you. Your Tan family may not be as rich as mine, but you can pitch in a little, right?" I pulled back, eyes cold. And by the way, the last time Joseph took money, it was to save you, not to me. So why are you begging me? Should I call you foolish, or just call myself that? Chloe's face turned pale. She opened her mouth to speak, but said nothing in the end. If she figured it out, good. If not, well, she's the one who'll suffer, not me. I went home for a bit, and wasn't surprised to find that my parents were gone again. Same old story. They only cared about their own lives, never looking back. All they wanted was a child who could inherit the family business. They didn't care who. Whatever, it's not like I ever really counted on them. I stayed at home for 2 days and my wrist finally started to heal. Then I took a car from the garage and headed over to Jonathan's repair shop. But instead of him, I ran into that big guy again, the one with the floral tattoo. He looked a little shy. "Hey sis, where's Jonathan?" I asked. He scratched his head, looking sheepish. "Brother Ming went out. Are you looking for him?" Then he smacked himself lightly on the mouth. Why do I always say the wrong thing? Can't she just visit without a reason? Then he grinned and said, "Sis, just have a seat. Brother Ming should be back soon." I nodded and sat down on the couch. There were several tea sets on the coffee table, so I made myself a pot and took my time with it. The big guy didn't. Levy just hovered nearby, sneaking glances at me like a curious kid. When he saw me making tea myself, he scratched his head again. "I'm no good with that stuff. Usually Brother Ming makes it for me. Hope you don't mind." I smiled and asked, "What's your name?" "Daniel. Is he good to you?" I asked, not even sure why. It just felt like the right thing to say. Daniel shook his head at first, and I thought maybe I'd read the situation wrong. But then he smiled softly and said, "No, Brother Ming is good to all of us." I raised an eyebrow. "Oh, go on. Tell me." Daniel nodded. "Most of the people working at this repair shop come from poor areas. A lot of them have physical disabilities." He began listing them off, one by one. Ow. "There's Ruhi. Works on engines. Can't speak a word, but he can tell what's wrong with a car just by listening to the sound it makes. Then there's Juan. He's in charge of maintenance. Has a limp. And Ken handles all the paint jobs. But the guy can't even read." He looked at me seriously now, his voice quieting. "When they first came to the city, all they wanted was a way to survive. But with no education, no skills, and bodies that didn't quite cooperate, they couldn't find anything decent. No one would hire them." Then he smiled faintly. A little proud, but Brother Ming took them in. He gave them food, a place to sleep, and time to learn. He paid them to not much at first, but enough. Over time, these men became loyal to him. They'd follow him anywhere. I glanced at Daniel, curious, "And what about you?" That something changed in his face. His usual goofiness disappeared, replaced by something far more serious. "I met Brother Ming 5 years ago," he said slowly. "Back then, I'd gotten myself into trouble with some bad people. They nearly beat me to death." His voice lowered to a near whisper. "It was Brother Ming who saved me." He clenched his fists. From that day on, I swore I'd follow him for the rest of my life. If anyone dares to touch him, they'll have to go through me first. Honestly, his words moved me. Deep down, I was envious. I'd spent most of my life in quiet isolation, surrounded by people who cared more about my last name than my well-being. But Jonathan, somehow he had earned this deep loyalty from people who had nothing. I suddenly felt a sharp longing to see him. Do you know where he went? I asked. Daniel thought for a moment, scratching his head. He didn't say much, just mentioned someone wanted to meet him near Tiancheng Plaza. I was about to leave when Daniel suddenly remembered something else. Oh, right, Brother Ming is actually really rich. Just doesn't show it. I raised an eyebrow. He also told us not to call you sis, Daniel added with a sheepish grin. He said since you come from a wealthy family, we should call you Miss. I frowned. Jonathan still insisting on formal titles like that. It felt strangely old-fashioned. When I arrived at the cafe in Tiancheng Plaza, I never expected to see what I did. Jonathan was sitting there with Chloe. She looked like she'd been crying eyes. Red voice land Jonathan was listening, his brows slightly furrowed. I stood there quietly, just watching. After a few moments, Chloe suddenly stood up and moved to sit beside him. A small alarm bell went off in my mind. Something didn't feel right. The old Mitha girl from my past life would have turned around and walked away. I would have blocked him without a second thought. I've been burned once. I don't tolerate messy, unclear relationships. But this time, I wanted to trust him. Just as I took a step toward the cafe, I saw Jonathan quickly stand like he couldn't stand being near her another second. And then, just as he turned, our eyes met. I stayed calm, but he clearly hadn't expected to see me. For a second, he froze. Then he rushed over. Jessica. Chloe came out right after him. She looked startled for just a moment before quickly fixing her expression. Mr. Ming, if you could just consider what I said, she started, but when she saw me, her sentence died. Her tone changed immediately. Jessica, what are you doing here? Did you come to see Mr. Ming too? She leaned closer to Jonathan on purpose, like she was claiming something. But Jonathan moved away instantly, stepping toward me. He looked at me with a hint of guilt in his eyes. Jessica, I cut him off, keeping my tone cold, but controlled. We'll talk later. Chloe watched us, and her eyes darkened. Jessica, she said bitterly, I really underestimated you. I just shrugged. Yeah, I think so too. Her expression twisted. I swear her face changed color 3 times green, white, then red. It was like watching someone knock over a paint palette. Honestly, it was funny. I'm not the type who suffers losses easily. In my previous life, I made the mistake of valuing people who never cared about me, and it cost me everything, not this time. Later that evening, Jonathan brought me home. The sky was already dark by the time we arrived. We both sat down on the sofa, the silence stretching between us. Finally, he spoke. Aren't you going to ask? I looked at him. Didn't you say you came back to deal with me? He asked quietly. I answered just as softly, if you want to talk, you will, Evan, if I don't ask. If you don't want to, then asking won't change a thing. He went quiet again, then said, Do you know why Chloe came to see me? I shook my head. I had wondered, of course. 100 possible reasons had run through my mind on the way home. But I wanted to hear the truth from him. Maybe Chloe had started to like Jonathan. Or maybe Joseph just couldn't stand seeing me happy and deliberately sent her to stir things up. After all, they were close-in, always had each other's backs. But then Jonathan suddenly asked me, Are you interested in that land in South City? I froze. How do you know about that? Because the land rights are under my name, he said calmly. It's something my father left me. I was stunned. What were the odds? So Chloe had gone straight to Jonathan, trying to get close to him through the land. But how would she even know that land belonged to him? There was only one explanation. Joseph told her. In the past life, when Joseph acquired the land, he must have dealt with Jonathan. That's how he knew. And now, he'd used that information to manipulate Chloe. Jonathan was still watching me, and it suddenly hit me. Wait, you don't think I approached you for the land, do you? A wave of unease washed over me, so while I'd been second-guessing him, he'd been second-guessing me too. I lowered my head. I wanted to laugh it off, but couldn't. That's when Jonathan gently cupped my face and looked at me, his voice low and serious. "Fool. Of course I don't think that." The thought did cross my mind for a moment, but I let it go quickly. I trust my instincts. I looked at him and asked quietly, "Like the way you trusted Daniel and the others?"
Ow.
Jonathan raised an eyebrow. "No, you're different from them. I saved them out of kindness. I saved you because you moved me. You really know how to flirt, don't you?" I pouted, half teasing. "You must have had a lot of practice." He smiled, full of affection, then gently tilted my chin up and kissed me a soft, barely there kiss, like a breeze brushing over water. "It's not flirting," he whispered. "It's real. It's natural. It's instinct." My cheeks burned and my heart raced uncontrollably. Afraid he'd notice, I buried my face in his chest. Pressed against him, I could hear the strong rhythm of his heartbeat, loud and steady, like it was speaking directly to mine. I closed my eyes, just savoring it. After a long silence, I finally murmured, "Jonathan, I like you. Just as much as you like me." He didn't answer with words. Instead, he pulled me closer, tighter, like he never wanted to let go. The next morning when I woke up, Jonathan handed me a document. I blinked sleepily, took it, and read it. It was a land use rights transfer agreement with my name on it. My eyes widened. "Jonathan, are you crazy? Do you even understand what this means?" He looked completely calm. "I've already withdrawn from the auction. You wanted the land. I happen to own it. There's no reason not to give it to you." I was overwhelmed. My chest felt tight, overflowing. Tears welled up in my eyes, but I blinked them back. This was a good thing, no need to cry. But his sincerity moved me so deeply, I couldn't stay still. So I grabbed his hand and pulled him up. "Come with me somewhere, before I sign anything." I took him to the Civil Affairs Bureau. Along the way, he asked me more than once, "Are you sure?" I just smiled. "Aren't you worried I'll take your land, ditch you, and go find someone richer and better looking?" He paused. "Thinking seriously?" "I'm not sure about richer. Better looking. That would be tough." I laughed. "Exactly. That's why I'm dragging you here." I didn't expect Joseph to find us so quickly. Jonathan and I had just stepped out of the bureau. We hadn't even put the marriage certificates away yet. When Joseph saw us, his face went pale with rage, his fists clenched, trembling. He said, "You really chose him." I rolled my eyes. "Crazy," I muttered under my breath, not wanting to engage. But Joseph suddenly grabbed my arm. Tears started falling down his cheeks. Crocodile tears, maybe. But part of me still wanted to hear what he had to say. So I told Jonathan to wait for me in the car. As soon as we were alone, Joseph blurted out, "Jessica, I regret it. I regret everything. Hit me, yell at me, do whatever you want, but please forgive me." I gave him a cold smile. "Regret? What exactly do you regret? Not saving me? Not loving me? Back when you had the chance?" His grip on my wrist loosened. His face went white, completely drained of color. He had no answer, and this time, I had nothing left to give. Even Joseph didn't seem willing to recall what happened in our previous life. Probably because every memory just revealed how terribly he'd treated me. Then out of nowhere, he started slapping himself over and over, muttering between hits, "I was blind. I was wrong. I deserve this. But Jessica, is there still a chance for us?" I looked at him for a moment, calm and unshaken. "Joseph, what do you think?" He froze, eyes dropping to the floor. For a second, it looked like all the life had drained from his face. But then something shifted, a flicker of desperate hope lit up his expression. "No, it's Chloe. It's all her fault," he blurted. "If she hadn't come back, none of this would have happened. I didn't even ask her to find you. It was all her idea. She came to you on her own." Grabbed my hand again, this time, like he was clinging to the edge of a cliff. "Please, Jessica, just trust me one more time. I swear the only person I've ever truly loved is you. I know I've made mistakes, I've sinned, but I'm not asking for much. Even if I can only be the third person in your life. Even if you don't love me, just don't cut me out completely." I stared at him, stunned. Was he really saying this out loud? I yanked my hand away and instinctively wiped it on my clothes, as if touching him had left a stain. "What are you trying to pull, Joseph?" I snapped. "You think I actually believe you love me? Because once you've been truly loved by someone like Jonathan, this feels like trash." But Joseph, still putting on his best heartbroken act, said softly, "I know I realized it too late, but I won't give up on you." His words made my skin crawl. I felt like I was being haunted by a ghost I thought I'd buried years ago. "If you don't stop this," I warned coldly, "I'll call the police." Joseph froze. His tears kept falling, but his body turned rigid. I didn't feel pity, only exhaustion. I just wanted him to disappear. "Joseph," I said firmly, "the only person you've ever truly loved is yourself. Not Chloe, not me. Only your own ego. You couldn't stand to see me move on. That's all this is. Why can I leave you behind and still have a better life? Why do I get to be happy? That's what's really eating at you. You don't love me, you just want to drag me back into your misery. But I'm not the same woman anymore. I'm not alone. My husband now, he's strong, merciless if he has to be. And he's surrounded by people who'd go to war for him." I looked him in the eye. "So if you want to try anything, Joseph, go ahead. Let's see how that works out for you." Then I turned my head slightly and spotted Chloe standing at a distance. I'd noticed her quietly following us for a while, but I didn't say anything. I only hoped that now, finally, she'd see Joseph for who he really was and stop being a woman so used and blinded. She didn't even realize how badly she'd been manipulated. My dad used to say, if someone's character is flawed, they'll never get far in life. I rolled over to face Jonathan and couldn't help but ask, "So, how far do you think we'll go?" He paused for a second, genuinely thinking. "It through then." He smiled and said, "With the way we are? I'd say 100 years together doesn't sound unreasonable." I smiled, completely agreeing. "Of course not. 100 years sounds just right." Then, he added with a playful look in his eyes, "It's not too much for your husband to ask for a decent meal, is it?" Jonathan looked at me like I was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen, like I was the only person in the world. His eyes held that quiet intensity, the kind that made you feel safe and seen all at once. They say loving someone is like taking care of a delicate flower. And Jonathan, he tended to me with such care, never letting me feel pain, never letting the world touch me harshly. Because of him, I bloomed stronger, softer, more whole. All the love I had searched for across 2 lifetimes, Jonathan gave me without hesitation. I wrapped my arms around his neck, kissed his lips, and whispered with a smile, "No, it's not too much at all."